So this is a scene here about election violence. So post-election violence. So it's pretty scary. Businesses are boarding up in anticipation of this supposedly post-election violence. And so here in Los Angeles, I believe Governor Gavin Newsom, he won't say what they're going to all do, but they're going to prepare for pre and post election violence. Some places like Washington, D.C., and some other places, well, in the article it'll express how there are many places that are getting prepared in the event that there's an episode, whether um, whichever candidate is to take the reins of being leader in chief or leader. So this you can see here where they're boarding up places so that they don't have uh, people tearing through the windows or through the doors, breaking glass and whatnot. So this is by Christine Phillips and Kevin Johnson and a Grace Hawk. This is out of USA Today. So Washington Alex Provenzano, who he owns a salon in the downtown. So I guess all of the downtown areas, um, are bracing for what could be. So Washington D.C. is one of them. They have installed doors and window coverings. So Wednesday, not knowing whether next week's election would prompt a replay of the protests earlier this year. And so they've seen a lot of protests in a lot of these downtown areas, a lot of demonstrations. So they're preparing for what could possibly be violence. So in which some businesses were damaged. And so, hey, downtown Los Angeles, when people are excited and happy about the Lakers or they're happy about the Dodgers, you see what happens with that. So just think of when people are upset, what's going to happen. So when the protests broke out in May, the entire street was vandalized, said Provenzano, who owns the AP Salon just off McPherson Square, a block north of the White House. And so that's probably the epicenter where they're anticipating heavy violence that could possibly ensue from the election. So I decided, in quotes, then that we had to board up. So he had said that the plywood remained in place until July, but with the contentious elections looming, Provenzano pulled the boards out of storage and recovered the windows and front doors. And so I'm usually a pretty positive person, but I hope for the best, he said. But the people are very stressed out, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the country right now, so it's pretty scary. And so large swaths of downtown Washington within blocks of the White House resemble a coastal community girding for a powerful hurricane. Hotels, office buildings, coffee shops, restaurants were sheathed in plywood, with some of the makeshift barriers stretching nearly entire blocks. So officials say that they're not aware of credible threats of violence on or after Election Day, but the business is dawning from the lessons from the last summer when protests had erupted across the country following the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police are bracing for possible violence, looting, and vandalism. An anxious country, so across the country, Americans are increasingly worried about the possibility of violence over a high-stakes presidential election, which analysts say could be marred in chaos as an anxious country awaits days or weeks for the results. And so that'll even bring more anticipation because you'd think November the 3rd is when you're going to get the results, but we might end up waiting to get the results, and that might make people even anxious and upset, um, even at the outcome, and suspicious as well, because people already are suspicious. But 3 of the 4 voters say that they're worried about possible violence, while 1 in 4 say that they're very confident the country will see a peaceful transfer of power in Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden if he defeats President Donald Trump. And so a new USA Today Suffolk University poll finds, so a lot of chaos. So these are related articles. So stoking of the anxiety is the president himself, Trump, who has relentlessly claimed without evidence that massive voter fraud involving mail-in ballots is underway. Meanwhile, local election officials are bracing for voter intimidation tactics, which I've heard that some of the polls had poll guards who were armed, and people were wondering who these people were. And in Chicago, the police department has canceled November days off for police officers in charge of managing protests. Police Superintendent David Brown said, so everything is uncertain, so we don't have any specific credible threats at this time, although we are well aware of what happened with the Michigan governor, Virginia governor, um, and militia planning to do something on election day. And so that's the other fear that we heard that there was a governor, and then there was also somebody from Black Lives Matter. They were on a manifesto, like a list of people that this militia was planning to kidnap. There were several names on there. So Brown said, referring to members of the anti-government group accused of plotting to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. And so in New York, there have been no specific and credible threats targeting election, according to the police department, but preparations have included crowd control and retaining for street officers in the event of protests, and having hundreds ready to respond to election-related demonstrations. So it's no secret that this election is more contentious than in years past. Exactly, that's what I was going to say, because this seems like it's such an intense election. So Terrence Monhan, the New York Police Department's chief of department, said last week while outlining election security plans. So in Portland, Oregon, where demonstrations and federal officers clashed during nightly protests outside the city's downtown federal courthouse, business owners wondered if they should close or board up their properties as well. So Police Chief Chuck Lovell said in a letter last week, so while we do not have any current intelligence to suggest violence, we know there is a lot of uncertainty and tension in our community during this time. So Lovell said, adding that the department will beef up staffing on or after election day. So downtown's ghost towns, Chicago's dozens of businesses along the Magnificent Mile shopping strip and throughout the downtown loop area did not remove temporary barriers that were installed over the summer when the city saw 2 incidents of late night looting. So restaurant luxury retailers operating through window covers in plywood or other barriers, and shoppers pass through entryway cutouts. City officials have been holding workshops in recent months to prepare for possible civil unrest after the election. So this is something pictured here. Dozens of businesses in downtown Chicago are boarded up on October 14, 2020. Many have been boarded up since the incidents of looting earlier in the summer. And so the city is taking all hands on deck approach to planning for the event, which the dice Executive Director of the Office of Emergency Management and Communication, said in a press conference this month. So we have been performing drills and holding workshops to be ready to respond to any situation or possible event that should occur in the city before or on after the election. So in Washington, D.C., officials are not recommending that the business board up their buildings, but they have set up a website for people to report suspicious voting activities to police. Businesses are also encouraged to install security cameras and to keep important documents such as insurance paperwork and lease agreements secure. So downtown DC Business Improvement District said businesses, especially those that were hit the hardest over the summer, are taking precautionary measures ahead of the election. So the group said it is aware of at least 12 properties around the White House and Chinatown that are being boarded up. And so downtown DC, BID encourages each business to take precautions such as securing outdoor furniture and signage that can be used as projectiles as well. So the group said that in a statement, adding that staffers will remove bike racks, newsstand, bolted uh, trash cans, loose piles of brick or rocks, construction materials, and other items that can be used to harm people. So on K Street, the owners of an A1 Wines and Liquors were fitting their front windows and doors with plywood covers on Thursday. And so this is how you can see where they're working hard to cover up a lot of businesses. And this worker carries wooden boards in the office and businesses downtown Washington, D.C., preparing for the post-election violence. So Natish Thurchuri, the store manager, said that they were acting early after learning a hard lesson earlier in the year when some of the protests turned very ugly. So windows were broken, a lot of stuff was taken. Thurichi Churi said, motioning to the shelves of the liquor, wine, and beer. So estimated damage of about $200,000 to $300,000, forcing the business to close for about 3 months. So there was nothing that they could do, he said. Now we are being a little more cautious. So Leona Goridis, executive director of the Golden Triangle Business Improvement District in Washington, D.C., said while some businesses are boarding up their properties, others are choosing not to. Some businesses, she said, have been boarded up since summer and have not been able to repair or replace their glass windows. So Provenzano, the salon owner, said that his plywood would remain in place through the inauguration regardless of who is elected, so he has not decided if he will be open. So I don't want to put my people or customers at risk, he said, so I'm going to play it by ear. So you can see how they're trying to board up things real secure so that they can make it safe so that their businesses won't be trashed. So Shane Jenkins, manager of Compton Lumber, the hardware near downtown Seattle, said demand for plywood has surged in 40% in just the past 2 weeks as the rumblings about a new round of protests are being discussed. So business is definitely up, and it's not the kind of business that you really look forward to. So May Pease manager, I believe May Pease is the name, that manager of Oregon's finest dispensary in Portland, said that they're installing metal gates so that the looters and burglars can't even get in the glass and break windows to the windows. They'll break them. So the business has been broken into 3 times since May, Pease says. So half of their windows are still boarded up after most of the recent break-ins, and they're debating whether to cover the rest. For now, P said it's really quiet outside, but it's pretty dead. So for me, I think it's the calm before the storm. So we'll see what happens or what it brings the week after. So, or what the week brings. So this is the scenes that are happening. If you see this happening in the like the metropolitan areas, like the downtown or wherever you stay, where they happen to be boarding up places because they're getting prepared for this. Because we have a lot of events that are taking place, especially here in California. They the Lakers had a recent victory, and then the Dodgers, after 32 years, they won a World Series championship, I believe. And so, both of those ended up, and these were happy events, and there was rioting, and if you had missed it, there were people that were all in the streets. They were gathered together. A Foot Locker was broken into, and you know, people were like, really, this is when people are happy. So just imagine people are disappointed and upset about something, and our groups are trying to, spark violence. So, or who knows? Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe there won't be any violence at all. Maybe they will just have like, peaceful protests. Maybe there won't be any drama. Maybe is a big maybe, huh? I'm just guessing. So I don't know really. What I do know is I've heard that Donald Trump has basically said that if he wasn't elected, that there might be riots. And then I did hear that some of the polls had some guys that showed up with guns, ammunition, and then people have kind of felt a little bit intimidated, like they have to feel afraid because they've been getting emails and threats that if they didn't vote for Trump, that something bad would happen to them. And so, speaking of that, now I'm gonna kind of shift gears. I was hearing that Lil Wayne was interested in endorsing Trump, another rapper, of course. And it's not 50 Cent, it's not Ice Cube writing something. Um, in lieu of what was talked about previously, but this is Lil Wayne, and so I have seen his face in some articles. I don't know how true that is, and maybe it is true, but I will say this: honestly, I've not bought not one of his albums, not even one, and I don't really think that everybody that decides that if you got rappers that are you know involved in being Republicans or whatever, everybody has their own opinions, and if they feel they're making the right decision, then you know I mean there's nothing you can say or do if they think they're doing the right thing. But I feel like a lot of this too is egos, and then there's other things. I feel like because they hear about what has happened to people from another generation, you have a younger generation who is unaware. They haven't had the same sets of experiences, even though they may be black, or they may not come from the same country, or maybe they hadn't experienced the same. They don't know what Jim Crow is. They heard of it. They're not really aware of what it is because they've never really had to experience that. They don't have a parent that has explained to them what that feeling was like to go out on the school playground, and as soon as all of the black kids come out, the white kids stop playing and they go in the house. And they look at you like you're filthy. Or you can't go to certain bathrooms, you can't go to certain restaurants, you can't sleep at certain motels, you can't live in certain neighborhoods. The things that people take for granted right now, that seemed to come easy, it wasn't easy back then. You couldn't just go where you wanted to. Now people go where they want to go. They have the freedom to do that. You have to be still aware of your surroundings and know who you're involving yourself with, of course, but it's a lot different today than it was in the time of Jim Crow. So they don't know what that feels like to have people basically tell you that you had to be out of the area before the sun goes down because your lives were in danger of being taken away, that you could be murdered, hung, lynched, beaten to death, killed any kind of way, heinous way. And when you tell this younger generation that, they hear it. It goes through one ear and out the other. It's just like COVID. If people don't know anybody that's sick, they're not going to wear a mask. If they have somebody that they're close to that is comes down with an illness, that's the only way they take it serious. And it's the same thing with all this stuff about the history of what has happened to people. This generation does not know what that feels like. They've had it a lot easier when it comes to that type of thing. The only thing that isn't easy is driving and are getting arrested and are getting hemmed up by the police. The fear of driving. How about having always a fear, not only just of driving and getting pulled over by the police, or but everywhere you go, you can't live in certain areas, you can't walk in certain areas, you can't drink or go to the bathroom in certain places, you can't eat at certain restaurants. Now you can go into restaurants and eat there. What if the restaurants had colored here, whites here? And if you decided to, the egos that we have today, a lot of people would not be here. They would be probably murdered. The arrogant attitudes, the egos, they would not be here. And so they don't know what that feels like. So seeing people that are rappers that don't have, that don't know what it feels like to have people say, you can't live here. You can't, I don't care how much money you make. Your records are, somebody else is going to take the credit for what art that you make. They're going to get all the proceeds or the money. You're not really going to, they just know you sung it, but you didn't get paid for it. There were artists like that. This generation doesn't know that. And so I don't really expect some people to make good decisions. That's what I'm saying. Because they have not a clue of what that life was. And they don't know somebody that has sat down and explained to them what that whole era felt like if you survived it. And so you can't expect hotheads to understand that the very people that you should have this misdirected, this anger that you have towards people of your own background, the anger should be towards the people you're rushing to endorse. You're rushing to give money to people who don't need your money. They don't have any good intentions for people that look like you. And they frankly look at you like you're a big fool because you're giving them money and they care very little of you. So that to see people and they show these people and they endorse people who, the very person that they're endorsing, if they saw them in any setting around people that are only high class, they would not want to be associated with them because they don't fit in that circle. And so it's so to say that, you know, maybe people think because they have money that lifts them out of a situation, but the same way you can acquire money is the same way you can lose it fast. Just because you get wealthy doesn't mean that you're going to stay wealthy. I've heard the stories of people having a lot of money and they were successful and they lose every penny. So anyway, having said that, um, looking at this here, I'm not surprised that this is happening. The election is pretty heated. It's I've never seen anything like. I was surprised when they had the Laker and the Dodger riots, but this right here, I could see this. The reason why they're boarding up, I could see craziness could possibly go down. I could see that. But anyway, having said that, I'm gonna let this video go. And I'm not trying to put anybody down per se. I know that there's young people who do have sense enough to understand what it felt like to go through that era. But there's some that either they don't know or they don't care or they don't understand what that feels like because they're so used to having things like restaurant. They can go where they want to. You want to go eat somewhere? Just go to that restaurant. Go in there and eat. Nobody's going to turn you away because of what you look like. And so, but what if we revert back to a time like that? Are those same people going to feel happy about endorsing people who who opened the door for that to go back in time to a hurtful time where people couldn't be human and live and coexist with one another? People don't understand what that feels like. You can't go to the schools you want to go to. You can't ride on the bus where you want to ride. You can't sit on the plane where you want to sit. If you can even sit on the plane, there's certain things you can't do that others have the liberty of doing. Some people just don't understand. And so I wouldn't expect them to make good choices, especially if they don't read anything and they think everything's a joke. And I think the same thing about this disease. People think it's a joke. Today, when I was at work, I heard two people saying they had family members that were sick with COVID. One from Mexico. And when I look in on the internet of Mexico, they were burying a lot of people. So I know it's real. But there's a lot of young people that don't know anybody that's been sick. They think it's funny. They think it's a joke. I see a lot of people with no mask, or they think they can't get it, or they maybe they know it's real. They think that they got Donald Trump insurance, health insurance. Everybody doesn't have that kind of health insurance. But anyway, I'm gonna let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening.